Canada's new Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau, with his wife, Sophie, just about to address the euphoric crowd.
The Prime Minister promised that his deficit would be tiny, temporary, and $10 billion. It was none of those three things. By 2021, only 3 years from now, the government will be spending more on debt interest than we currently spend on health transfers. The government's agenda is not only higher taxes on the middle class today, it's higher taxes down the road to pay the wealthy bondholders and bankers that own Canada's out-of-control national debt.
Did we learn nothing from what just happened?
And Trudeau's deficits will not be small. Mr. Trudeau has made tens of billions of dollars of spending promises. He has no idea what he is talking about.
Yeah, I think you covered it right off the top there, Akshay. $130 billion in new spending and tax measures. I think that is the headline. It's also the fact that there is no path to balancing the budget.
That's the question on my mind, because now we find out that Mark Carney's federal deficit this year is going to be $92 billion. This is massive. Outside of COVID, nothing comes close to this. It's $2,000 for every man, woman, and child in Canada. The total estimated combined deficit for the next 4 years could be as high as $350 billion. But that's probably even higher for reasons that we'll get into. For context, adjusted for inflation, World War II in total cost Canada just over $400 billion.
We've got another bond to buy.
Our fighting men have just won history's greatest victory for freedom. To buy bonds for their future and for your own future.
We're all surviving a cost of living crisis brought on by inflation that was a direct result of government spending from COVID, and for all of the things they use COVID spending as an excuse to expand the scope and size of government forever.
We have collectively seemed to lost our sense of perspective when it comes to government numbers and the fiscal situation of this country. When we're talking about a deficit that could hit $250 billion, anybody who told me that in January or February, I would have thought I was smoking something very strong. But now it's almost an accepted fact, and the government keeps on announcing additional spending measures.
Carney's spending and deficits aren't as bad as Trudeau's. They're worse. His spending today will be his tax hikes tomorrow. Did we learn nothing from what just happened? Did we learn absolutely nothing from COVID and the buckets of money that the Liberals spent claiming that Canadians needed them in every facet of their lives, all while nothing got better?
I, Mark Carney, do swear that I will be faithful and bear true allegiance to His Majesty, King Charles III, King of Canada.
Because the Liberal government is doing the exact same things again. We need to talk about the consequences of this spending, because if Mark Carney gets away with this is the kind of spending that will be normalized, and that every Canadian will pay the price until we're all just broke.
Well, the C.D. Howe Institute is calling on the Liberal government to make steeper cuts to program spending as it expects Canada's deficit to top $92 billion this fiscal year.
First things first, what is the deficit? In a nutshell, when the government spends more than it takes in, it needs to borrow the remainder. It's a lot like a credit card or a line of credit, but the numbers are huge. We're talking about billions. So instead of a credit card, the government issues bonds. And just like your credit card and other debt, the government needs to pay the interest on the money that it borrows. That last part is important, and we're going to come back to it. In many ways, the government's budget is just like your own. If you need to borrow money for a project for your house or for your business, you can go to the bank. And if the bank thinks it's a good investment and they're likely to get their money back, they'll give you a loan plus interest. The government of Canada operates in a similar way. When it needs money because Mark Carney has a project he wants to spend on, like banning gas-powered vehicles and spending hundreds of billions of dollars on charging stations, the government of Canada can turn to the bond market to raise the money. And if the explanation is good enough, they'll buy the bonds, which is a loan to the government, plus plus interest. The annual deficit adds to the total debt the country owes. Today, the federal government, not including the provinces, owes $1.25 trillion. So we need to wind back the clock to the previous Liberal government. Remember this guy?
I don't know. When I think about the biggest, most important economic policy this government, if re-elected, would move forward, you'll forgive me if I don't think about monetary policy.
It's really important to remember that when he came into office, he was going to run a few small deficits.
When we talk about that investment, we're very clear. We're going to run 3 modest deficits in order to pay for it.
And in the end, it exploded. Justin Trudeau doubled our debt. He had more deficit spending than all of the prime ministers in Canadian history combined.
Oh, but he'll about run he says, a modest deficit, a tiny deficit. So small you can hardly see the deficit. A modest deficit, and only for 3 years. Only for 3 deficits, three modest. Friends, we've gone through this before. Look at the mess in Ontario with the modest deficits of the Liberal government.
The consequences of all of that spending were felt by every single Canadian. Increased borrowing costs and massive spending pushed inflation into multi-decade highs. The cost of everything skyrocketed, and it hasn't come back down. Just go to a grocery store. And then, to deal with all of the inflation, interest rates had to start going up.
As widely predicted, the Bank of Canada moves the overnight rate up again, 25 basis points to 5%.
Which hurt everyone with a mortgage or a line of credit. If government spending was the answer to all of our problems, this country would have been a utopia by now. The exact same thing might happen again. Because in this case, Mark Carney isn't even starting by pretending that these are going to be 3 or 4 small deficits. He's getting right into it.
In your platform, your COSA platform you released today, you outline almost $130 billion in new spending.
We're not spending that amount of money, we're investing that amount of money.
And these numbers are massive. Nonpartisan projections show that Canada's deficit just this year is going to be $92 billion. Not the budget, just the part that we have to borrow. Over the next years, it could average $77 billion in a year, which is a huge increase of what had been expected. What's even more concerning is that these are optimistic numbers. The report is, quote, deeply skeptical that the government's plans to increase revenue will actually occur. That's how bad it is. The report is even skeptical that the government will be able to raise taxes enough to cover these deficits. But let's be clear, they are absolutely planning to raise taxes. Look at this, they're already pre-positioning the media to start raising taxes like the GST. They're seriously considering making everyday essentials like clothing and meals alongside nearly everything else under the sun more expensive just because they can't exercise a little bit of fiscal discipline, just because they can't get their house in order. And trust me, it won't stop there. If you want to balance the budget, you've got 3 options. You can save money, you can borrow money, or you can tax the money. And what's the choice for this Liberal government? You guessed it, it's door number 3. They've never met a tax they didn't like, or at least one that they wouldn't use for political purposes. There is no clear strategy replacing the Trudeau-era structure that Mark Carney claims to be dismantling. At some point, he'll tax you more. The big question is how will Mark Carney pay for his agenda if he keeps cutting taxes that should have never been imposed in the first place while boosting his spending? $20 billion in projected revenue next year just tossed out the window, plus another $6 billion over 5 years from the new ditched digital sales tax. That's a good thing, tax that should have never been there in the first place, but not because Mark Carney wanted it not to be there. His explanation for the spectacular backpedal, apparently, the tax was never meant to happen. It was just a, quote, bargaining chip.
We have, to be clear, it's part of a bigger negotiation. It's something that
we expected in the broader sense that would be part of a final deal.
It's very simple. Prime Minister Carney in Canada caved to President Trump in the United States of America. It was a mistake for Canada to vow to implement that tax that would have hurt our tech companies here in the United States.
This isn't bold leadership, it's improvisation disguised as strategy. If the government can't raise enough money from the bond purchases or tax increase, they will print more money. If the market won't buy the government bonds, they could have a similar arrangement where the Bank of Canada steps in to buy bonds back. They've done it before. You remember, during COVID. That's what caused the inflation that made everything from groceries to homes more unaffordable. This will drive up the cost of borrowing for every Canadian, which will inevitably increase interest rates. That's where we're headed. It's no different. And this brings me back to the interest component of the deficit. Today, on our $1 trillion debt, Canada spends $54 billion a year on interest. That's more than we spend on healthcare. And if Mark Carney adds another third of $1 trillion or more to the national debt over the next 4 years, the amount we spend on interest is going to skyrocket.
The Prime Minister promised that his deficit would be tiny, temporary, and $10 billion. It was none of those three things. By 2021, only 3 years from now, the government will be spending more on debt interest than we currently spend on health transfers. That's higher taxes in exchange for absolutely nothing. The government's agenda is not only higher taxes on the middle class today, it's higher taxes down the road to pay the wealthy bondholders and bankers that own Canada's out-of-control national debt.
Without actual fiscal discipline, interest will continue to consume a larger and larger portion of the federal budget. And without fiscal discipline, there won't be money for things like healthcare and old age security or all of the programs that the government runs. All that future generations will be doing is paying off that debt. How is that fair? Here's what Conservatives have to say about this. Canadians shouldn't have to pay the price just because Liberals can't write a budget, present a budget, can't keep their spending under control. The solution is actually quite simple. Instead of raising taxes even higher when so many people are hurting, we'd cut government spending, end the waste and inefficiency, and stop shipping billions of taxpayer dollars to overpriced consultants and overseas. It's so clear what the answer is. Why can't Mark Carney see that either? Conservatives will hold Mark Carney and his reckless, costly government to account and will always fight any new tax increases alongside his wasteful and dangerous spending. To help us by doing that, like and share this video and tell Mark Carney that his government has to stop raising taxes and keep their hands out of your wallet.